What's up, guys? I'm going to show you the Joan of Arc build order for 2026. This is the JD build order. The pros are playing JD wrong. GUA is going to show you the way. This is how I think you should play JD in 2026. Right now, a lot of the pros will go like only knights. They'll go super heavy on knights, and then you just have so few units. You can't really force a fight with JD because you have like 6 knights. They're all playing it wrong. You don't make knights with JD. This is the kind of the quick answer for this build order, is that you do not train knights. That is a short answer for the JD build order, and I'm going to show you exactly how it's played. So there's a couple different iterations. If you're playing versus a spear rushing civ, a civ that makes spearmen in age 1, then you will gather from your sheep at the start of age 1 until you get up to age 2. If you're playing versus a civ like Roos that does not do a spear rush, then you select all of your starting villagers and you put all of them on a straggler tree. You just let them chop once, just a single chop. So they will chop off 60 wood, and then you send them to deer if you have deer that are close by. I'm playing on the map Relic River, so deer spawn close to the TC. I know this. So yeah, I chopped exactly one time with all the villagers, and then you will move those 6 villagers, the 5 villagers, and JD onto the deer. You can try to kill the deer, ideally close to the mill. Have one villager build the mill while the rest can gather. And then all of your newly trained villagers, I actually mess up here a little bit. Your newly trained villagers, you're supposed to put 4 villagers onto gold. And then, yeah, you get that mill built, and as soon as the mill is built, you research survival techniques. You try to kill the deer when their deer are close to the mill. So, like, if in a little bit, I can try to select 2 villagers to shoot this deer and kill the deer when it's really close to the mill. And, yeah, you want to put your first 4 villagers. I kind of messed up a little bit. I put my villagers on gold too late. But the build order is all of your starting villas gather from the straggler tree once. They drop off the wood. Then they build mill on the hunt. You research survival techniques first. Researches very quickly. It buffs the food gather rate on the hunts. And then you put 4 villagers. Your first 4 trained villagers will go directly onto gold. And then after that, all of your newly trained villagers will go on to sheep. And then you need a little bit of gold to research wheelbarrow, but with this build, you have enough wood, just barely enough wood to get survival techniques and to get wheelbarrow. So you should get wheelbarrow as soon as you possibly can. You get both upgrades in age 1. I kind of make a little mistake here. This is a wreck, and I wasn't on my home computer. I wasn't on my home setup, so I think I was messing up a little bit here. But you got to keep an eye on your gold income, and as soon as you have enough gold, you want to click wheelbarrow. So be a little bit better than GUA. Take the advice. Yeah, I delay wheelbarrow. There's like one approach. You could technically delay wheelbarrow until you start advancing to H2 and then get it. But in my opinion, it's not worth it. If you do this build crispy, you can basically get survival techniques and get wheelbarrow in age 1 and then still have like the 400 food and the 200 gold at about the exact same time. So I do get wheelbarrow here eventually. I just do it like super late, right? I start queuing it up like a minute later than I should. So there we go. Now I've researched wheelbarrow, but I could have gotten it. It costs 98 gold. So as soon as your 4 villagers drop off at 98 gold, you want to queue it up. So you should be queuing up wheelbarrow, probably at like a minute and a half, just as soon as that 98 gold comes in. But either way, I am getting wheelbarrow, and these are like the very small things where this kind of separates Conqueror 2 players from Conqueror 3. Like 90% of the time or like 99% of the time, I wouldn't get wheelbarrow this late. But I probably lost like a minute on the upgrade because I got it so late, much later than I should. And then I like to build School of Cavalry with my hunting villagers. You could put 3 or 4 villagers on it. I would probably suggest 4 because if you do age up a little bit later with when you get wheelbarrow, I think I do add a 4th villager here. It depends on, yeah, you could do 3 or you could do 4. You do want to make sure that JD is building landmark because JD will get more XP. So here's JD, it is building landmark. The hero unit will get more XP and get closer to leveling up. And then basically as soon as you start aging, you can move like 5 villagers or a couple villagers onto wood, the straggler trees here, and you're going to start gathering wood. And so going back to what I was saying earlier, at the moment, all the pros and like the really good players, they have a different idea of how to play JD, and obviously maybe I'm not as good as Marine Lord or top guys, but with that said, like when I'm at my best, I'm very good. I've actually taken a tournament game off of Marine Lord once. This was like a while back, but I played like a best of 3 versus Marine Lord, and I actually beat him in game 1, and it was a China mirror. And the reason why I beat him is because I knew something that he didn't know. This was probably like 2 years ago, but basically I knew like in the China mirrors that there was a really OP Palace Guard timing push, and essentially what I did like a fast castle into this Palace Guard timing push, and Marine Lord did what the meta was, and he did, like fast dynasty into then a fast castle, but I overwhelmed him with Palace Guards like way sooner, and it just idled all of his villas, and yeah, I took a tournament game off of the best player in the world, and that was not because I'm like a better mechanically player than him, or because I'm better than him. It was because I knew something that he didn't know. So, although other Conqueror 3 players might like talk trash, like there's a lot of competitiveness. They say like, oh, like obviously GUA doesn't know what he's talking about, and that's a perfect example of like I knew something that a pro player who's a lot better than me like didn't know. He did what the meta was, and I built a perfect counter build to like his. And yeah, so obviously, I know what I'm talking about, and there's a chance maybe I'm right with this JD stuff too, right? Maybe I'm playing JD off meta, but it is the better way to play JD. You never really know. So yeah, my whole approach, like I was kind of saying before that little bit of a rant, is that at the moment, all JD players, they will make knights. They'll make like a ton of knights. They basically will like never make any horsemen from the stable. They'll play JD like the same way you play French, where like you just go super heavy in knights. And I think that's a very bad approach. And my logic and my thought process behind this is that the whole thing with JD, with this civilization, you want the hero unit to fight in H2. You want to force fights. And a lot of times when people play against JD, they will like play super defensive. They'll like do a TC boom, or they'll go fast castle. Basically, they'll do everything they can to avoid fighting in H2. Because when units die, JD gets XP, and then JD gets closer to the tier 3 version, which becomes very strong. So yeah, the opponents, they'll do everything to avoid fighting, which is smart. And if you're going heavy into knights, which most JD players do, they make a bunch of knights. Knights are very expensive units. They cost 240 resources, and you just kind of can't force fights, right? Like you can't dive underneath a TC and a wooden fortress in Age 1. Like the TC just does so much damage. You can't really force engagements when you have like 6 knights. You just can't. You can't really dive on their towers. So it kind of makes a scenario where, like, yeah, you're making knights, but no fighting is happening, and JD's just not getting any XP. And my whole thought process is that knights, they're just too expensive. They don't allow you to force fights. And if you look at units, you can click on a unit to see their siege damage, or their torch damage. So Horseman has 13 torch damage. And all melee units have the exact same torch damage, whether it's a spearman, a horseman, or a knight. They all do, I believe it's the 13 torch damage. They all do exactly the same. So you could have 5 knights, and you could try to dive a tower or dive like a hunting cabin with 5 knights, but then your torch damage is 5 times 13, right? That's how quickly you can burn down a building. However, horsemen, a horseman costs half the resources of a knight. So for every knight, you could have 2 horsemen. So if instead of having 5 knights, you could have 10 horsemen. And that means that you have double the siege damage, right? Because a horseman and knight does the exact same siege damage. So right here, I have 5 horsemen. This would be 2 knights worth of siege damage, and I already got really good value. I killed 2 hunting cabins, but if I was making knights, there's no way I would have sieged down these hunting cabins. Maybe I have a lot of archers. I could add in spearmen. Usually I don't go heavy in archers here. I usually go horsemen and spearmen because that composition goes really well together. But I'm playing versus Roos, and at the moment the meta with Roos is they usually just like fast castle for horse archers. This guy's actually playing very non-standard Roos. He actually did like a fast second TC, but this is actually good. JD likes when opponents go fast second TC. The only civ that, because you can eventually just dive the opponent's base. The only civ you can't really dive the base of is maybe like English. But yeah, basically my whole thought process with JD is that you make 0 knights and you go, usually I go horsemen and spearmen, and then I'll add in archers. But depending on what civ you're playing versus, you'll do a combination of those units. And you could, spearmen, you can have 3 spearmen for every 1 knight. So you can have 3 times the siege damage of a knight if you have 3 spearmen in comparison to 1 knight. And that's, you know, my whole thought process is that you just get so many units and you get so much siege damage that you can then push like towers. You can essentially just force fights. You can force the player to have to respond, to have to fight you in H2. And then that's where JD gets his XP, and that's where JD shines, right? That's my whole thought process. And then you're probably playing aggressive. You can get map control. So boom, I moved out on board. Got 8 villagers getting from the board. Build the tower here. And yeah, now I'm adding in barracks. And yeah, so a very unique playstyle that you never really see out of JD. I'm on 0 knights. Like this whole time, I do 0 knights. And I won a tournament game doing this same exact build. And at the moment, a lot of people say JD is a weak civ, like one of the worst civs. I disagree. I think they're pretty good when you do the GUA meta of 0 knights and forcing fights. And I did beat a very good player in a tournament recently, probably like a month ago, a player who's like 2k ELO. I beat him with JD versus Golden Horde. And most people would say, oh, that's for sure like a Golden Horde favored matchup. And I'm the underdog in the matchup, but I beat a very good player with JD. I actually have that video on YouTube if you want to check that one out. So yeah, the whole thought process, you go 0 knights, and then if the opponent goes Castle Age, once they hit Castle Age, then you can switch into knights, because French and JD, they're very good civ at playing down in age because you have a knight in H2. So, you know, if the opponent wants to make man-at-arms, you can make knights, which can, you know, do well versus H3 man-at-arms. Or if the opponent makes H3 knights, you can still make H2 knights, and they can trade pretty efficiently versus the knights, right? You probably will have more H2 knights than his H3 knights. So the whole thing is you stay on 0 knights until your opponent goes Castle Age. I think here maybe I see that he has knights. It's one rare scenario where, like, if you're playing versus Roos, and usually Roos doesn't make H2 knights, but if they do, then you can start adding in your own knights. Because I start seeing his knight count starts climbing, so I kind of break my rule of doing no knights, and I'm like, okay, let me now start adding in knights because I maybe don't have enough spearmen. And then I'm gonna try to lure this boar. His army actually accidentally comes here. But yeah, I'm basically forcing fights. I'm trying to lure this boar further away from his base and closer to my base so I could potentially steal his boar, and also just so that he cannot gather from the boar. So that's a really nice pickup right there. And okay, yeah, so sorry, going back to when they hit H3, I then switch to knights. And basically the whole thought process with JD is that you never want to go H3. You never want to advance to the Castle Age. Basically, you want to stay feudal like forever, like literally the entire game. And you just make this massive army of 0 knights, and then once the opponent hits H3, then you stop making horsemen completely, and then you make knights from like 3 stables, and you then get a bunch of knights out to deal with the H3 army, and then you can have like the tier 3 JD. And make sure you're always using the consecrate ability. It makes you use it on a military building, reducing the food cost of military units by 25%. You always want to try to prioritize these on stables because those are the most food heavy units. So always use them on stables, and then you could, you know, if you don't have, if there's extra abilities, you could use it on archer range or barracks. So in this specific game, I know he's on 2 TC, and he's going to outscale me eco-wise, right? He's 20 villagers ahead, which is a lot. So if this game kind of just continues to progress and I don't do anything, you know, I would eventually lose, but I'm actually very happy. I was very confident this entire game. I thought he was going to do like the standard Roos meta where you do 1 TC into a fast castle and you spam horse archers. That's why I opened like 2 archer ranges, because I was trying to get a bunch of archers, so that as soon as he started training horse archers, I already had like 15 archers on the field to deal with them. But then I noticed he added a second TC, so... And obviously, I saw he added second TC, so that means he's going to play Feudal Age. And now I was really happy about that, because I knew my game plan then changed. Now my game plan was like, okay, I'm going to mass a lot of units. I'm going to try to pick off the hunting cabins early if I can. I killed 2 hunting cabins for free. And then I'm just going to do a timing push. I'm going to get a huge army of all, you know, mostly 0 knights. I started adding in some knights because I saw he was massing a lot of knights. But I'm going to get this really big army, and then I'm going to do like a timing push like around the 14-minute or 15-minute mark where I just dive underneath his TC. And I have, because usually in H2 you don't want to attack underneath TC because the TC can do a lot of damage and it can like demolish your army. But if you get to a point where you have a huge army, then you can kind of sit underneath the TC. And also the big thing is that you want to do this dive when JD is on the tier 3 version, when it becomes a cav unit and then it becomes way stronger. So you either want to wait until you get JD to tier 3, but if there's not a lot of fighting, you won't get JD there. So you might have to dive the TC to get JD to tier 3, and then you can upgrade it. You just have to be extremely careful not to let JD die to the TC fire. He's doing a big counter right here. So at the moment, I'm caught out of position, and there's kind of two things you can do when this happens. You can either send your entire army back to try to deal with these knights, which would not be a good move, right? I have some spearmen. I don't even have that many units to deal with the knights. And look how far my army is really out of position. So if I go back, his knights will just run away, and he could just continue to raid more villagers. Basically, me going back to my base to deal with these knights is not good. I'm losing a lot of villagers here. I just lost like 8 villagers on this wood line. That's a very good raid by him. And look at the vill count right now. I'm at like 30. I'm at like 37 vills, and he's at 64. So that was rough. That was a very bad trade. Like, I'm potentially in a very bad spot. Military-wise is looking different. My army value, I am ahead in army value. So the best thing in this scenario is do not go back to your base to deal with this raid. Instead, counter push and basically just do a base trade. And now his units are kind of out of position, right? Because now he's at the point where once he sees that I'm full diving his base, he's going to be like, oh, I either need to bring all my knights back, and then his knights are going to take a long time to cross the map to get back home, or he has to like continue and like just do the base trade and try to attack more of my economy. But now his units are kind of out of position, right? So this is the best approach, right? You don't go back to your base to fend off these knights. Instead, you just you base trade. This is what's called a base trade, where you just attack each other's base. So I have to be super careful not to let JD die here. I have to get XP, but I have to not let JD die. He could be targeting JD. I'm actually, well, there's not a lot of vills inside this top TC, so I think I'm aware of that. So I feel okay getting JD a little bit closer, but I'm maybe overextending here a little bit. So I make this giant push. And how does he respond? He realizes, okay, he needs to come back. He could have left like 1 or 2 knights here and continued to raid. He probably should have done that. Yeah, this is the point where like he could have just said, he could have done a full base trade and used all of his knights to attack my vills, or he could pull his knights all back, or he could leave like 1 or 2 knights here. He decides to bring his entire knight mass back, and he's going to try to like get a trap. He's trying to delay this. So now he's trying to delay this fight until his knights get back. But he's actually not having good micro, and like, boom, look at this. His units are fighting while half of his army is not in the fight. So this is like really bad by him. This is a good job of me, like full diving his base, like not caring about his TC fire. He really should have put a lot more villas inside his TC. That was actually another huge mistake. He could have had the 15 villagers in this TC. He would have like either sniped JD or forced JD to go very far back and maybe not get XP. So he's definitely making some mistakes here. I'm getting a lot of XP, you know, with JD. I use the heal ability there as a lot of my melee units are getting low HP. And I'm being super cautious not to let JD die here. I got really lucky that he made some mistakes and he didn't put villas inside TC, because it would have been a lot harder to get XP. I would have had to keep JD outside of TC range and then maybe not get the XP, or it would have been more challenging, right? But he definitely messed up, and me had made a pretty big mistake there. So boom, now I have JD in tier 3. As soon as you hear that sound, you want to upgrade JD to the tier 3 version. I did go with the archer JD. I usually will do the melee one. The only reason why I did the archer version of JD is because I thought he was playing Roost, and I thought he was going to do like the semi-fast castle for the horse archer spam. So in that scenario, the archer would be better. But probably like 90% of the time, I'll do the melee version of JD because I think it's better. So yeah, boom, you go to tier 3, and as soon as you go tier 3, you always want to do the 3 champions one, not the horseman one, especially when you're doing this like forever H2, right? I have my macro is not great. I was getting rated, but I have no intentions to go H3. I lost a ton of wood villas. That's probably why my macro is so lopsided. But yeah, I have no intention to go H3. I'm going to stay H2 forever and basically just win the game in H2. So then you always want to do the 3 champions because they can tank like crazy. They're really good when an opponent is in H2. The champions are very, very good. So as soon as you get to tier 3, you want to call those champions immediately. So boom, I called 3 champions, and they have, if I can click on one here, 175 HP. They have 4 ranged armor. It looks like I have the 1 pierce armor upgrade. Or they actually, maybe it just came in. I think I also timed this with like maybe the blacksmith upgrades. So they have 5 ranged armor, which is huge, right? They can tank for very long, and that's why they're so good, right? He does have a lot of knights here, but I think I have a decent number of spears. I'm trying to use my archer abilities on knights as much as I can. I'm trying to do as much as I can to keep JD alive. I looks like I kind of made a little bit of a mistake, overextended with JD for a little bit, but now I'm just trying to run away. That's a main thing with JD, right? Keep this hero alive. You don't have to fight. You basically just have to have JD around the fight, and it will get XP. It doesn't have to be attacking a unit, right? As long as JD is kind of in the general vicinity of the fight, then JD gets XP and it levels up. So you always want to keep it alive. Just use your abilities, use your heal, and boom, just completely demolish his army. And he's still up like a ton of vills, but now I'm just in this scenario where he just can't gather, right? Look at this, he's got like 20 more vills than me. But he's forced to tap out here. He could have done some things better, sure. Like maybe his knights, he kind of fought without his knights. He could have even used villagers to fight in the engagement. Maybe he loses like 15 villagers, but he holds the engagement. But yeah, that's it. This is the JD build order. If you guys want to see more JD videos, let me know. And this is like the initial JD build order, right? Of doing the 0 knights into the forever H2. But, for some civilizations, you might have to adjust your build order a little bit. So let me know in the comments down below if you want to see more JD builds, specifically with this like 0 knight GUA JD meta. Thanks for watching, guys. Leave a like, comment, and sub.